Hello, and welcome to A Poll from the Shelf, a series where I take an RPG book, supplement, adventure, or source of inspiration from my collection that I'm either unfamiliar with or I feel deserves to be in the spotlight and take a deep dive to see what lies within. And speaking of inspiration, today's delve is one from a series of books that kept me enthralled for hours upon end at my local library pretty much on a daily basis, with its stories of mythology, folklore, fairy tales, and magic, accented by pages of wonderful art that I can't wait to share with you all. So without further ado, let's take a dive into the first book from the Time Life Books Enchanted World series, Wizards and Witches. Oh, would you look at this? Here it is in all its fake textured glory. Yes, Wizards and Witches. There we go, I can talk. Wizards and Witches from the Time Life series, The Enchanted World. And can you imagine being like just 9 or 10 years old at your public or school library and finding this tome upon the shelves amongst the other, probably, a few supernatural style books, UFOs, ghosts, and whatnot, but there was never enough for my tastes. But when this series started to trickle into my library, I was just enamored with it. Spending hours and hours going through the various, volumes, reading it a bit day after day as I was waiting for my, parents to pick me up at the library. And, it would just, the hours would fly by. And so, so this came out, and I believe in 1983 or 84. And there was quite a bit of a commercial run for the series. It's been so long, I don't remember if it was primetime commercials. I doubt it. But I do kind of recall maybe them being on the weekends or sometimes later in the evening, when your parents were at their weakest, when you can beg them to get you this book. Unfortunately, mine didn't, but as stated in the introduction, my library that was across the street from my elementary school, where I would go to every day after I got out, was fantastic. The librarians that ran that place, there was no shortage of books, and were very open to requests. And just, it seemed like, every few weeks or so, there would be another volume other than the initial 4 or 5, I think, that came out at first, and it would just grow and grow and grow. Obviously, some interest me more than others. Wizards and Witches being, definitely a perfect way to draw you in. But yeah, just a fake gold leaf and texture, little ASMR there, textured cover. But so let's go ahead and open this up and take a look at it. So, and I've got my little floating head in the corner out of the way so we can revel at this tome in all of its glory. So, The Enchanted World, Wizards and Witches by Brandon Lahan, and the editors of Time Life Books. Yeah, this was a collaboration of various folklorists, historians, and other literary people to, bring this book to life. So let's start with the content here. So I don't know if all the books were like this, but there would each chapter, they weren't large. This book runs probably about 130 some odd pages, and it would kind of be a division. There would be the primary chapter that would, kind of meander in and out, bringing you into the content that I was talking about, with a variety of different folklore sources and whatnot, and kind of touching on several instances of things, such as in here we'll take a look at shortly. But then there would be a secondary, more detailed story within it, usually with its own set of illustrations to go with it, and then it would go back out into the next chapter, so meandering in and out. So interesting way. I know one of the this book, believe it or not, had some complaints, but primarily from the the stuffy intellectual and academic world. I kind of felt that a lot of these things were bits and pieces were taken and kind of mushed together to kind of like compartmentalize a lot of these things. But this was not meant to be a textbook for people getting their doctorate in folklore, but this was meant to introduce children into these stories and into these things that that otherwise a public school in the United States would not have available to them. And it was wonderful, and it just lit up my imagination and interest. Probably around this time that I was reading these books, I'd been interested in fantasy and such things. I probably had already read The Hobbit, or maybe just about to get into it. Things like the Black Cauldron, the Lloyd Alexander books, and had already been through some of the Endless Quest books for D&D, but was probably just on the cusp of discovering D&D as a game itself, outside of a lot of the game books and choose your adventure books. That was personally my introduction. But so immediately, here in chapter 1, you're hit with this, this beautiful image here, apparently depicting Väinämöinen, a Finnish wizard, I believe. His stories, his folklore come from Finland, and obviously seems a little bit pissed here about something, or that's the general demeanor of a lot of these, wizards of yore. So highlighted here with a little description about him. At the end of his adventures, the mighty wizard Väinämöinen set sail on a copper boat for a land between the earth and the heavens, far from his Finnish home. Now, mind you, most of my introduction to things such as this were Saturday morning cartoons. So one of the things that's obviously going to get someone interested is, if I open this up as a 10-year-old and I read that, for me, it's going to spark my interest and make me dive into this book. So as stated, it kind of it's a bit odd. So the story starts off, and several of the others will kind of start off talking about a particular protagonist or antagonist. This one being Väinämöinen, and it will touch a bit on one of his stories as it goes through. But then you'll see after a few paragraphs here, then it kind of changes into another wizard as it sets, as it ends Väinämöinen's story here. It kind of begins, and that was only the beginning. Still singing, the enchanter turned to, my God, Jukainen. And as he sang, bushes sprouted from the sleigh's shaft bow, and the beautiful sleigh itself dwindled into a pile of logs into the lake. So it will carry on a bit more, and then at a certain point, it will kind of focus on the subject itself. So it continues with the tale here, and then here we go. When the world was in its infancy, truculent youths would aspire to wizardry and were well advised to tread softly near their mighty elders. None can measure the power of an ancient wizard's words, as the hapless Jokainen. Woof, this is going to be a tough one to get through. And then it continues to discuss others in here, such as Lohi, the sorceress from the northern reaches. And then it takes you to the Russian steppes for the such of like Volga Veselovich, and Cathbad from Ireland, and on to the Isle of Man, where Manannan MacLear. And so it focuses on some, and then it goes into talk about Merlin and such, and then we'll give you a bit of information about wizards. And again, this was blowing my 9-10-year-old mind as I was getting to this, because for me, wizards were just something that was on the front of a Cookie Crisp box, someone that would make magic, even if I had touched upon the such as of Gandalf, who was a wonderful example. Doesn't his particular style of magic within The Hobbit pairs in comparison to the power that was being wielded by the ones being spoke about here from fairy tales and folklore. And so the artwork, as you can tell, a lot of it is will change in various degrees, but absolutely beautiful. It just draws you right in. And then you'll see there's a bit of a sidebar here that tends to, on occasion, will talk about the pictures and the illustrations. And nothing against the illustrations themselves, but sometimes the illustrations are precariously placed within these books that they don't really tend to have much to do about what's being discussed on the page. So sometimes you'll be reading something and you'll look at the imagery and like, this is not what I'm reading about. So sometimes it may be focusing on, the sidebar here as with Life Songs in the Lands of the Dead. This is speaking about Vanamoinen and Ilmarinen, and Lohi or Lohai, the sorceress. So it will go in and out, as it continues to talk about, various types of wizards, and sorcerers and whatnot. It then begins to shift back in as, it continues on here, focusing more on, things as, Samhain and seasons and, the dawn and dusk being magical times, aspects such as nature. And so it kind of gives you a foundation as you continue to read more about the various stories in these books. So it goes through that for a couple more pages, and then we see it then begins to talk about a sorceress named Serdwin and her story, as it begins to speak about, Serdwin is her or a sorceress? Yes, sorry, my bad. And then it goes back out into telling you a fairy tale, folklore story, and whatnot. And then as you can see, as you're reading through this, right, you're reading a bit about Serdwin and Guionbach. Oh, I'm going to have a hard time with these. And then as you flip over to this beautiful page of some sort of activity of it's going around the hearth, and then there's a sidebar here that speaks of Guionbach. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. His as he. I hope it's a he. I'll check back. But speaking of, Guionbach made Saradin a wizard, and thus by magic, let's see, here it is. She pursued the boy as an animal. She ate him. As a woman, she bore him again. And then by magic, he became the enchanter. Taliesin. Again, okay, this is great. We're speaking about this, and there's some imagery here, but you have no idea who this Taliesin is. And it will continue on with the story, and I don't think Taliesin is mentioned until we get into, several paragraphs down. So when you're reading these books, with this beautiful artwork, you're constantly kind of flipping back and forth and going, okay, what does this imagery pertain to? Nonetheless. So yeah, I can kind of see a bit of the gripes from, some of the regarding the layout and some of the academics as, it's compressing these wonderful stories, and I'm sure, carry on in length and detail. But again, these are for children. And then so it goes on to tell more of the story of Taliesin, and his pursuits of magic and wizardry. And then here we have the subchapter. So immediately you'll get a continuation onto page 25, but then boom, we get a subchapter into a particular story of the Wizard of Kiev. The singers of Russia tell this tale when the glittering camps of the Golden Horde, the Tartar heirs of Genghis Khan, were spread throughout the frosty Caucasus. The Tartar leaders turned greedy eyes north toward Russia and found themselves matched against the enchanter Volga Veslavich. Strange tale gathered about his name. His mother was a princess of Kiev, it was said, but his father was a serpent. From the mother came his courage, and from the father his skill and guile. At night he assumed the shape of a lion and hunted forest animals. Where he fished for sturgeon, he took the form of a pike. But by day he was a warrior and leader of warriors. So then it goes on to continue to tell the tale of of Volga. Again, with its own, the central stories, will have its own particular artwork associated with it, and these tend to be better as far as the illustrations matching, the words of the page that you're, that the story tells. So very short, very simple. But again, it's just kind of, the fade to black, and then, we're suddenly in Russia. And then we continue on with the story of Taliesin, and then his, him meeting Gwydion, I believe is her name, and so then it continues on to then continues on with these folklore stories and fairy tales, and then we begin to trickle back, towards the stories of Vanamoinen and Ilmarin and Lemminkainen, and likewise Loki, the sorceress, and then boom, here we are. Suddenly, we're looking at a plate mail armor knight on his steed, assumed to be someone called Manannan MacLear, as he was riding his horse called Enbar, on or near the Isle of Man. So what? And then you'll see that particular story doesn't necessarily come up here until we start getting into the tales of Cormac MacArt. And continuing on, where do we eventually see him? So, yeah. And then down here in a secondary, sidebar, they mention Merlin. So for someone with, a bit of ADHD or dyslexia or whatnot, these stories, as I was reading them, my attention would be diverted, and then I'd be distracted and go, wait, where's Merlin? I don't see where Merlin is. I think one of the reasons why that I devoured these books and read them so long on a daily basis was I was constantly rereading these things, because being dyslexic alone, the way that I read, it's in little bits and chunks, and I have to read and do another Passover for the stuff that I skipped over to come together like a giant puzzle, and then eventually it starts to stick. But so yeah, it kind of moves you all over the place. So we continue on with the story of Manannan, and onwards with the tales of King Cormac, but still the illustrations are focusing on the tale of Merlin, which here is a wonderful image of him stealing away with the with the baby Arthur, to keep him safe until the day comes that he can claim his throne, and yet still no mention of Merlin, as the stories of Manannan, Taliesin, and Vanamoinen. Again, if I'm pronouncing these wrong, you can stop shouting and just send me a message. And then finally, we see here a mention as we make the transition here into Merlin, where it starts to talk about him. Like the older wizards, the English Merlin attracted legends as nectar does bees, which makes the man himself extraordinarily elusive. The songs and predictions of the two early Welsh Myrddins, one a bard and companion of Taliesin, one a warrior driven to madness and prophecy by the horror of battle, usually were attached to him. And the mysteries and frightening giants circle at Stonehenge was explained as his work. So finally, we're getting into the tales of Merlin, and again, this was eye-opening, because it's the pretty much my only experience with Merlin would have been the Sword and Stone, or other more kind of child-friendly versions of him. But then you start to get into the nitty-gritty of who Merlin was, what he did, and how important he was towards the regarding the tales of King Arthur, and kind of find out what a complete asshole he could be at times. He was extremely focused and on his goals, but that often meant stepping over several people and whatnot, as his his attention to Arthur, getting him back on the throne and maintaining that throne was no one was going to get in his way regarding that. So here we have another wonderful image, with Arthur and Merlin, out on a small boat as he is being handed Excalibur by the Lady of the Lake, which also I think that was something that I wasn't aware of, at an early age. And in fact, I think it's probably something that I learned fairly recently was the sword that was pulled from the stone was not Excalibur. It was a separate sword altogether. The sword that he had, this Excalibur, was the one provided to him from the Lady of the Lake. So thank you, Time Life Books. You taught a 10-year-old boy sitting at a library well. And so then it continues to tell the tale of Merlin, well into his old age, where the tale goes he didn't necessarily die, but he had taken up with the likes of fairy and the fae, which allowed him to sleep, potentially housed in a tree, and until the day that until the call comes out once again to come to the aid of his countrymen. And so that's the end of Merlin, as it goes into the other subchapter, the Welsh Enchanter's Fosterling. Beautiful imagery here. I tend to like these interstitial stories, these subchapters, a bit more because they're focused. They're focused on a particular tale or story, and usually, they tend to be wonderful little tales, and maybe contain snippets from the more generalized descriptions through the chapters. But this one tells the tale of Gwynedd, not the tale of Gwynedd, but the wizards Math and Gwydion, as they go on to tell a story regarding them. And this one is a little bit longer than the Wizard of Kiev, but still just as impressive artwork and imagery. All right, so chapter 2. Then we tend to take a turn towards the dark, which is great. So we've moved on from a lot of these wizards and sorcerers whose primary power came from the earth and nature and will, and then we get into the masters of the forbidden arts who maybe getting their their strength and magic from places that they probably shouldn't be. So this one focuses on such tales of of the likes of Roger Bacon. I believe this will continue. We'll speak on about other aspects of that. Mephistopheles, the dealings with with Satan to get your powers, and manipulate the wonders of the world, but usually at a very dear cost. So again, this will kind of meanders in and out as it describes this different style of magic, and the tales and stories of people fiddling with these things, and sometimes getting nipped in the ass regarding these as they're dealing with dark powers that no man should be. So continuing on, we'll see that it then touches on a bit about Nostradamus here in a sidebar. His powers of prophecy. May not be something that came to him naturally. Things that he may have traded in order to see into the future. Again, these are just tales. And speaking about how wizards were scholars. Magic now is like science. It's poetry forgotten, and this is when we begin to get into a lot of the darker aspects as mathematicians who don't really care about much besides, and scientists, except a means to an end, will obviously do whatever it takes to get the outcome that they're looking for, and that means going into dark places and making dark deals. So we have the subchapter, kind of detailing a bit of the tarot cards, and this would be the one that I'd be huddled over, because at 10 I was still going. I was raised Catholic and was still going to to church, and this would be the ones where I wouldn't want my parents to see, because this was forbidden stuff. This was black magic, and this is going to crush your soul, and you'll never be able to enter the kingdom of heaven, and yada yada yada. So this right here, this particular painting right here is probably one that kept this book out of so many children, because if I'm not mistaken, this was highlighted in the commercial. And to see a shrouded wizard, sorcerer, dealer of the black arts over an ancient tome in some cavernous temple with very little light, and this would have screamed satanic panic at the time, and would have either been taken out of the hands of children or would have been refused to be handed to them. So this touches upon briefly the Black School. Some brave wizards of Europe, it was said, learned forbidden knowledge in a school presumed to be in Spain, a cavern reached by winding staircases leading far into the earth and sealed from the sunlight by the iron doors. So you can just see my little mind, my freaking little head starting to open up to these things, and you can almost plot the course where this will eventually lead me to, being more interested in Dungeons and Dragons and Advanced Dungeons and Dragons as a game, as you mean these stories that I'm reading about, and I'm learning about these different types of magic, and the way that they're coming with these, that they're dealing with these powers and the issues that come with them, that I can portray this and play this. Sign me up. So then we continue on, Legions of the Night, where a lot of this imagery is going to be familiar with so many people, as it talks about Satan, the great adversary, and then focusing on particular demons that were highlighted on regarding the tales of Mephistopheles, and the story of Faustus. And again, this was something that I was not aware of. I had it's just like going to Catholic school. There's Satan, and sure, there's demons, but they didn't have personalities. They were just little secondary red guys with pitchforks that would do the bidding. But so this would be even more forbidden knowledge that couldn't let my parents know about, and several other kids couldn't either. And so it goes on to talk about the stories of Faustus and his dealings with Mephistopheles. And here's another timely painting of old Faustus the wizard summoning Mephistopheles and continuing on with their dealings. And so we've got, oh wow, it's been a while since I've seen these. Yeah, these would be these freakish image, just the horror in these things, and such a different take on the aspects of magic. Magic was bright and flowery and colorful, and would conjure flowers and rainbows and a bowl of Lucky Charms. But this was different. And this engaged me more so. The darker side was always more interesting than the other aspects of this tales of Merlin and whatnot were fantastic, but this was different. This was forbidden. And then it goes on to talk about the tidings of heavens. I mean, believe it or not, the stars and the movement of the sun and the moon could be wielded as powerful items to conjure and cast if you only had the proper ways and means to harness their power. And then it goes into the secondary part of the book, which is witches. So, and this one tends to go in the same aspect. It's going to talk about things such as the natural aspect of what we would call witches, and then likewise the darker side, the satanic witches and whatnot, and how they would bargain for their power and make trades. And again, with beautiful artwork, but it doesn't. It really didn't hold your hand through it. Again, illuminating. Witches were a pointy, they wore a pointy black hat and rode across the moon on Halloween and tried to eat little children as they coax them into their house made of candy. But this would show me, a lot of the modern day, visuals of what witches were. That they weren't just these horrible old crones, but they were, women who wielded the power of nature and healing and and knowledge and wisdom and stuff that they would share with other women as they continued to, carry on this faith and this this idea that you can live in harmony with such things. But just like with wizards, there's two sides to the coin. And this was always great. This was one of the things that I loved about this book. So a lot of the sidebar regarding the photos here was focusing on the idea of witch's familiar, which was fantastic. This can kind of going into these books for speaking of inspiration from earlier, these books can be mined for all sorts of stuff, but a lot of the things that are associated with Dungeons and Dragons, things such as getting your familiar, a lot of them it's just a secondary attachment. In old school it was a few extra hit points and something that you can send down a dark tunnel to scout for you, but reading about these in here, they had personalities. They, and in particular familiars, depending on what you chose for your familiar, meant different things. So such as, the hare or the rabbit. And then, obviously the story of Rapunzel is a tale of a particular witch, which kind of gives a bit of insight into a, not a totally different version, but a different story about that. A tarantula or a spider, a raven, these things meant different things and kind of would show, according to the book, a particular type of, witch that you might be. And then focusing on things such as the witch's garden, herbology, as mentioned before, being able to harness the healing aspects and also the harmful aspects of nature. The secret of flight. This is mentioned the pointy hat witch flying across the moon, but this was something that wasn't solely associated with just the Wicked Witch. It's mentioned here, the secret of flight. Few witches ascribe the powers of flight merely to brooms. Really? Distaffs or farm implements that served as their nighttime steeds. The magical energy that transported them came partly from an ointment thickly smeared over their bodies that incorporated the most potent herbs in witchcraft, monkshood, henbane. The most potent herbs in witchcraft, monkshood, henbane, deadly nightshade, mandrake, and hemlock, blended with other extracts and a base of lard, or it was whispered, the fat of unbaptized children. The ingredients combined in a magical synergy so powerful that witches, by their own accounts, were sprinted across entire countries in the twinkling of an eye. And continuing on with familiars. There we go. I'm with that stupid wordplay again. Which witches? The cat, the snake. Wonderful black and white imagery here of a coven getting together on as the seasons change and transforming people into toads and whatnot. So again, I know I'm skipping over this rather quickly because I don't want to spend time reading this whole thing in detail because obviously I want you all to check this out. But I remember some aspects of these things from the last time I read it, which was years ago, but not everything. I'm not a folklorist, and maybe if I spent more time reading folk tales and fairy tales, I would be able to recall it easier. But one obvious one that's never left my mind is the tale of Baba Yaga, and here's the perfect image of her traveling in a mortar, rowing the air with a pestle, and sweeping her tracks away with a broom. And this one, not as much imagery as the others, but it is the last subchapter as it focuses of the tale of Vasilisa, I believe is how you pronounce it, and the Tale of Baba Yaga. And this is where I believe this particular edition ends. Yes, it does. So there we go. Obviously, an in-depth bibliography, and I would immediately go. When I would see this, I would go to the library and say, "Do you have these books? Do you have these books?" And of course, a little library in Anaheim, California, probably didn't have 99% of these books, but they would definitely try to get them in if they could. But they would always say, "Well, maybe go to the colleges. The colleges may be able to, provide you with these books." And I was too scared to do that because college was so far away and it was a totally different world. And then here we are closing with the credits and the editor of Time Life Books, Inc. Let's see here. The Enchanted World, Ellen Phillips. And editorial staff for Wizards and Witches, Tim Appenzeller, Donald Davison Cantlay, and the researchers Sarah Schneidman, principal, Megan Barnett, Charlotte Fullerton, and Patricia N. McKinney. So there you go. So yeah, this is just a bit of a quick kind of surface level deep dive because I didn't want to I could sit here and just read it bit by bit for like an ASMR thing, but who wants that? But yeah, I just wanted to touch base on these things because they've been on my shelf for a while. I don't have the whole collection, but I do remember these being just these wondrous books that would just ignite my imagination and later on would be tools that you could go to if you wanted to bring a bit more of fairy tale or folklore representation into your games. And to this day, it's still a great source to go into, and likewise, just an enjoyable read. If you're unfamiliar with some of these things, or if you're looking to add some of these stories to your game, or if you're writing a game, it's a quick reference to give you a bit of a bit of a taste on some of these wonderful stories from the past, and without having to do a heck of a lot of research. So, and again, this is a bit of nostalgia aspect from my past, and I'm turning 50, and that shit happens. So, so there you go. This has been another pull from the shelf. If you like this and you want me to take a look at some of the others, let me know. I don't have the whole collection, but I definitely can, take a look at some more. I know this really doesn't pertain directly to gaming stuff, but let me know. I mean, I'm looking to change up and do things a bit differently on this channel just for fun. And that's the primary goal. I'm not making any money doing this. I'm doing this just for fun and to kind of provide, and turn the spotlight on things such as this for whoever may not be aware of these things. So you can find these books in excellent to decent shape on eBay. They're not super expensive, but obviously you're going to pay less if you get a large collection as far as individual books. But I mean, again, I personally, if I was looking for these on eBay, probably wouldn't pay more than $20 for them. But obviously, it's whatever the market will bear. But if these are definitely easily found in many, many, many thrift stores across the U.S. As parents would and continue to just dump these off into a donation bin as their kids got older and moved on and didn't take them with them. So there you go. Thanks. There we are. I'll edit this out. No, I won't. Thank you for watching. I do appreciate your time. Please like and subscribe this. And also, if you have a moment, head on over to the Titterpig site and have a listen on our most recent episode where Keith and I have a wonderful chat with our friend Roz about solo gaming. And until next time, have a wonderful day.